What is going on, guys? It's Modded Warfare here. Welcome back to another video on the Xbox Series X, another hardware tutorial or hardware video. I don't really expect a lot of people to follow this, but I think it's kind of an interesting project to try and document anyway in this video. Because what I'm going to be trying to do here is install some LED strips to the Xbox Series X, to the actual holes, the actual vent at the top, so we get some LED light coming out of those holes, which is kind of what we saw in the promotional material for the Series X before it came out. There were videos showing the Series X and this kind of green light coming out of the top. And then when we actually got the console, there was no LED in the console whatsoever. It's just a little green bit of plastic underneath, which is kind of disappointing. So we're going to try and actually do it ourselves here and get that green LED light coming out of the top, or, you know, RGB. And yeah, and also when you compare it against the PS5, the PS5 just looks a bit better with the LED that it has. The kind of blue LED that switches to white when it boots up, which looks quite good. And then you compare that to the Series X, which just doesn't have anything. And if you're wondering why I have a green power light on the console, it's just I swapped out the LED in a previous video. I have a tutorial on that, so I'll link it in the cards and in the description. But we're going to take things one step further here by trying to put these LED strips in the console. So the way I'm going to do this, if we open this up here, you've got an remote to change the LED color. You've got the receiver box for the remote, so you can change the colors. We're going to have to try and find somewhere where we can fit this in the console, hopefully. And then we have the actual power cable. Now, we're not going to be actually using this power cable to power the LEDs, because the problem with this is that we would have two power cables sticking out of the console to power, one to power the LEDs, the other to power the console. And then the LED lights would not switch on and off with the console. They would be powered separately, which is not good. So we don't want to do that. What we want to do is basically cut this, and then we'll get the, you know, the 12 volt and the ground connection off this. And we will try and, you know, connect that to a 12 volt and ground connection on the Series X motherboard. That way we're actually drawing power from the console itself rather than drawing power from a separate, you know, power cable. Which is just better, because then when we switch on and off the console, the LEDs will turn on and off with the console. Just a much better solution. So that's what we're going to do, or try to do anyway. Then we have the actual LEDs here in this bag. So we'll try and open up here. So as you can see, just a small LED strip there that we're going to put around the fan. So yeah, let's get into this. So the first thing we need to do is open up the console here. I've already done a full tutorial showing how to tear down the console. So if you're interested in how exactly to take apart the console piece by piece, I've done a full video on that already, and a video on putting it back together once it's taken apart. So again, those will all be linked in the cards and in the description as well. All right, so as you can see, I've got the console on its side here. I've taken the screws out already. We're just going to lift up on the back here to take this off. Firstly, for the LED control box, we've got two options here. We can put it potentially in here. It's kind of a small gap. This looks like the best gap to get this in. It's going to be a bit of a tight squeeze, but we should be able to fit this in here. So yeah, it's going to be a tight squeeze. We want the little receiver to be sticking out a bit so that we can actually maybe get the remote round the back and get it to change colors so we can use the remote. But yeah, it's going to be a tight squeeze, but it should fit there. This is an intake vent for the, you know, for the heatsink and everything. So yeah, we are going to be constricting the airflow a little bit here, but, you know, not much we can really do about that. Again, the fan should kick up, hopefully, to compensate. If not, maybe it'll rise by a few more degrees than normal, but it should still be within limits. So we should be okay. All right, so let's take the fan out here so we can have a look at this. Get this connector off. Okay, so this is where we're going to put the LEDs, along the sides of the fan here, right along the side, because there's a little hole here that we can feed the wires through to go to the receiver box. So yeah, it would be to here. So yeah, we've basically got from here all the way along to here. Okay, so we're just going to cut it here. So this is going to be our LED strip that we're going to have around the fans. So the next bit is going to be the deciding factor on whether this is going to work or not. And that is to take apart the console further, get the console out, get access to the motherboard. We want, you know, the easiest access to the motherboard possible. So, you know, there's only a small bit of the motherboard that's accessible at first. So if we can find a good ground and 12 volt connection that we can latch onto and draw power from for the LEDs, then we'll be in a really good place to do this. Okay, so here it is. If we get this off, this is the part of the motherboard that's easy to access, relatively speaking. Yeah, that one's a 5 volt. 5 volts, but we want 12 volts. But luckily, what I spotted here is this connector that plugs... It's one of the connectors that the power supply plugs into. Literally says 12 volts on it there and ground right there. So if I put one of the points on the 12 volt point and the other one on this ground connection at the side here, as you can see, it says 16 volts right there. Put it on this ground connection as well, 16.8 on here, again 16.8. Although, you know, this multimeter is on low battery, so it is a 12 volt point. So yeah, hopefully you can see there, you got 12 volt ground, or on that point that sticks out the side there is also ground. So we can solder one wire to that point, one wire to that point, and then that will give us our power for the LED. Okay, so now we have the ground and the 12 volt connection for the console to power the LEDs with. We'll do a quick test to make sure that it all works. Okay, so here's the power cable. So I was going to cut this here and strip down the wires, but it turns out I've already done that with another similar cable for LEDs I did on my computer a while ago. So I did have it connected to a Molex connector, but as you can see, it's the same plug. So I'm just going to use this one instead of wasting this power cable. So you can see, same plug, but I've just cut off the end here, and there's two wires that come out. Obviously, you've got your 12 volt, which is the red, and you've got the ground, which is the black. And we're just going to solder the other ends of these wires to this, and then that will power our LED control box. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is get a wire, just kind of measure it to pretty much the length up to about here where the fan's going to plug in. And I'm going to cut that wire. And I'm just going to do 4 of these wires that are roughly that same length. So the idea is that these wires will be connected to the LED strip. They'll come through the little gap in the fan and they'll run down, and they will be soldered onto the other end of this connector. So we'll take this off here and desolder it from the LED strip, and then this will plug into our control box. So yeah, those black wires are just basically to extend the connection from the LEDs, which are up here at the top of the console, down to this connector, which will be at the bottom of the console, so that we can apply power to the LEDs. Okay, we're at the finishing touches here. So, got everything we need. So we're going to take our improvised LED strip here on the fan, and we will slot the fan back in, just like that. And then this will come down and plug in. So what we're going to do first of all is we'll plug this into here. There's our power cable. And then this will go down in here like this. Then we will connect this up like so. And there we go. Okay, so we're just about done here. I'm just going to use some hot glue here to secure the wires in place. The black wires are a little bit too long, so I'm just going to hot glue them here to get them out of the way. I could cut them shorter, but you know, I can't really be bothered at this stage, so I'm just going to hot glue them in place. And then here we're going to get the back panel and try and slot this back on. And hopefully we'll be able to fit it in here without too much issue. And then we can just put the screws in. And now that we have the back panel back in place, the mod is now complete. So check out the results. So yeah, anyway, as you can see, I think it turned out pretty well from all of those shots that I showed you right there. And as you can see, stacked up against the PlayStation 5, the Series X is looking much better, even better than the PS5 in the LED department now, which is pretty awesome. So yeah, just a few final thoughts on this whole mod essentially. So as you can see, the control box has a bunch of different modes that I showed you, the different flashing between different colors. It's even got the audio, and the LEDs were actually changing according to the sounds in game and the music, which was pretty nice. So it's got all those different modes currently fading between the different colors. So one of the things that I would suggest that we could potentially do in terms of improvements and stuff is maybe take out that green under plastic layer that's there. So that underneath the plastic, obviously you have the little green plastic layer underneath the holes. And you know, in some cases, it makes the green definitely stand out a lot more. I would say it makes the green look a lot better, but it makes some of the other colors look not so great. So it can kind of make the blues look a bit greenish. It makes white look a bit green, and it can also, it makes red look pretty bad, to be honest, in my opinion, because it's kind of like, you can still kind of see the green with the red, and it doesn't look that great. So that would be one potential thing we could maybe do, is remove the green underlayer. I don't know really what to call it, the green plastic layer underneath, and that might improve things. Another thing is that, as you can see here, the LED control box, you can't change the colors just by pointing directly at the console. You have to reach around to the back to change the colors, and that is obviously because the control box is at the back of the console, and that's the only place where we can actually get line of sight with the IR receiver to change it. So one of the things I was thinking of doing, I didn't actually do it here because I didn't want to damage the casing, but one potential improvement would be to drill a hole above the sync button. So where the USB and sync button are where the LED control box is sitting inside the console. So if I drilled a hole in there, maybe above the sync button, and then poked the IR receiver on the control box through that hole, hot glued it in place, then you'd be able to point the remote from, you know, far back, as long as you have line of sight to the console, and you'd be able to change the colors that way rather than having to reach around to the back. So that's another potential improvement to this mod that could be done in the future. And one other improvement, of course, something that I would personally like to do, with the 12 volt point that the LEDs are soldered to right now, it receives 12 volts even if the console's switched off. So the LEDs will always be on even if the console is off. Now you can switch them off just by using the remote, hitting the power button on the remote to turn them off. But it would be a more elegant solution if we could maybe, if it's possible, to find some kind of point on the motherboard of the Series X that only receives maybe 5 volts of power when the console is turned off and 12 volts when it's turned on, and then solder the 12 volt point for the LED strips to that point instead. And then that way the LED strips would stay on when the console is on, but they would switch off when the console is switched off, which would be a more elegant solution generally. So those are a few improvements that I would suggest making to this mod if anybody's planning on doing something like this themselves. I do think in the future though, we'll probably see LED fans, so you can just replace the whole fan with an LED fan. That's probably what the future of a mod like this will look like. Just plug the connector in and it's good to go. So we'll see if something like that materializes in the next few months or years or whatever. So, but anyway, I really enjoyed doing this mod. It was something different. I don't often get the chance to do these kind of hardware mods on my channel. I mostly do software stuff and software tutorials for modding consoles like PS4 and everything. So it was interesting being able to, you know, do something like this for a change. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video or found the information useful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll hopefully see you guys in the next video.